What is your superpower?
I'd probably say my creativity.
Knowing nerdy trivia.
My superpower is being a good listener.
Devising a million questions.
Helping people.
Making people laugh.
My superpower is that I'm determined and never give up.
Hello and welcome to Voice of the Community. Thanks for joining us on this podcast on this nice summer day and or winter, whenever you're listening. Absolutely. How are you doing today, Erin?
I'm doing okay. I had a little bit of sickness the last couple days and just trying to get through that. So feeling a little low, but excited we're coming into fall.
Absolutely.
How about you, Harry? What's new?
No, I feel like a lot of cool things are happening. We are coming into fall. There's just so much going on. It's a beautiful time at Meristem's campus. If you're within 50 miles of Sacramento, come to Meristem. But you could listen to this podcast and literally come on the next Friday because the fall weather brings beautiful. The air gets cooler and the vegetables get plentiful. And we're doing a lot of wonderful things in our work skills department to be discovered. But I mean, we'll tease you, and then But once we dial everything in and we become we'll have people on here that can really describe the process. But we're just increasing our internships. We're continuing with our internships, giving young folks with neurodiversity paid experience. We're also working on a job exploration and a class. What we're doing is we're teaching individuals how to be ready for the workforce. We do that with our job exploration classes and our one-to-ones, where we sit down with individuals and we go over actually how to help yourself. And one of the things that we discuss in our one-to-ones actually is perfect for today's topic, because today's topic is anxiety, I guess, and strategies that you can use to help with your anxiety. I'll just get right into it. The disclaimer: we are not psychologists or therapists or certified, and also we aren't certified life coaches. But except that Erin actually is a coach, but life coach, I don't know. But through TAP and through Meristem and all the people that we've experienced with neurodiversity, we do feel like we have somewhat of a knowledge, and we're able to put everything into a basket to try to help somebody.
Yeah, definitely. And second, Harry, we're just speaking from our life experience today for whatever it's worth. We just thought it's a very prominent topic when particularly supporting neurodiverse, because anxiety is often an underpinning, for lack of a better word, force that can affect an entire day, or it affect whether you get to a job in a timely manner, or whether you can stay in that job for some reason.
That's true. And I don't have the statistics. However, most of the people that we've experienced through Meristem, 80 plus people, hundreds of people at TAP, like through all these people, they all have anxiety.
Yeah.
And we always tell the employer when we're talking to them about it, just about like things that the employer can do to, you should check out our Two-Way Street podcast, just things that the employer can do to help themselves, help people. We always say that everyone has anxiety, everyone has all these issues, whether they're neurodiverse or not. But for the neurodiverse person, it can be a game changer. If certain things aren't put into place, they have anxiety. Another thing that is an issue is communication. So they might have anxiety, but they can't really communicate properly to anyone. Sometimes that might be a therapist or a family friend or whomever they are actually seeking for support, but they struggle to really verbalize what is actually going on.
Yeah, and you might see a whole bunch of different behaviors that manifest themselves as a result of that anxiety, like large outbursts, getting angry, shutting down. All of anxiety can elicit all of those things, and if you're not aware that it can be an underpinning thing, you can be like, oh, well, he's not a good employee, or they can't work socially with people. And it's like, no, wait, maybe there's something in the environment that's triggering the anxiety response, and if there's a way that I can adjust to support that individual, maybe we can make that individual be able to be much more effective in the workforce rather
Absolutely. And I feel like this is also for, if you're supporting somebody with neurodiversity, then this podcast is also for you, because what we've determined, it's kind of like what we do here at Meristem, because like we've mentioned, and Erin, you were just sharing that a lot of people can't verbalize it. So we do a thing at Meristem. I mean, we always ask the question, why? If something is happening, and you have to discover it, so we have to, now at Meristem we have a team of people, but we always feel like we have to be detectives sometimes to figure out what is going on.
Yeah.
The student coordinators and ILS management do a great job with helping with that, but we have to do that because sometimes the individual is having a lot of anxiety or different things, and we don't know about it, we don't know why. Another thing sometimes is also medication. Whether they've forgotten to take their medication or the medication isn't working or whatever, can also be a reason why a behavior is, and you don't know if it's anxiety, is it a medication thing, and so you really have to investigate the reason.
Yeah, to Harry's point, I think it's just any time, like from an employer standpoint, from a job coach or support standpoint, being willing to be open to understanding what might be behind the behavior is a really important skill, and just practice as a general approach, because oftentimes it could be, hey, there's a certain noise that's really firing up my nervous system, and now I just walk away, and it's like, well, did you communicate? All I see is the walking away part. But if I'm curious about what could have caused that, then I start by, hey, I just saw that you had to walk away from work. Help me understand what was going on. And if I start from a curious kind of active research approach, it opens the door, a lot more effectively to somebody being able to verbalize or communicate. And even if they can't, that approach is less anxiety inducing, whereas if I make statements at somebody and they're already kind of in a heightened state internally, whether I know it or not in the moment, I can escalate that situation inadvertently by coming at them too directly. By asking a question, I can kind of draw out, and even if they can't articulate it at the time, it has the quality of dissipating rather than escalating a situation. And so it's a really important kind of mindset to have when working with somebody on the spectrum, someone with anxiety, probably just in general with any employee, it's effective, but particularly with this population.
And a really cool thing that we're doing, I'm not sure when you'll see it, but we have a training for employers on our website, tapautism.org, on how to help somebody with neurodiversity. We're actually redoing we're going to be redoing they're 4 modules, they're 20 minutes long, we're going to be redoing them, and we just started our initial discussion on how we want that to occur. We've had a few sessions together. Erin was not a part of that, but one of the things that we've come to the topic of how to help, and because we have also an accompanying handbook, and we have different sections where we talk about quiet rooms and different things that an employer can do in the workplace to help an individual. And we've come to the section of what's practical for the employer, this and that, different things, but there are things like quiet rooms, and these were specific to, if you watch our training, to an office. So we're also trying to come up with ones for a landscaping, but things like dimmable lighting, quiet rooms, just things that sometimes an individual may need headphones to. But one of the things that we're really trying to do is, and we do this in our job readiness curriculum at Meristem, is to try to get the individual, as part of our two-way street podcast, if we can get the individual to articulate is like to communicate to the employer what supports they need. That is one of our number one suggestions. They don't need to go towards an employer and feel like they have to say, I have autism, I have this thing, diagnosis. But if they could inform the employer of what supports they need in the workplace, then the employer can be better prepared to take them on.
Yeah, and I mean, even like clarifying, hey, I have autism, but and I have these needs. Just you know, I think it does help sometimes because you know, like, whoa, I might, if I don't know that you have autism, like that's a lot of needs. Like, I don't know if we can accommodate all those needs, but if I hear, oh, autism, and then here's what I need to be successful, I'll probably be more receptive. Well, let's dive into anxiety and just kind of explore. Let's start personally. Harry, what induces anxiety for you?
Well, thank you for asking, Erin. Everything, but personally, like being vulnerable here. For me, a lot of my anxiety is based around time management or the lack of preparation for being on time for something. That goes into a whole other thing. And I mean, I have neurodiversity, okay, but I've had some strategies within my life that have helped me. So an example would be
before we go to strategies, I just want to unpack the trigger.
It's like a formula here.
So you're saying when you're unprepared and you know you have things to do, anxiety gets heightened.
Well, the funny thing is, I am always unprepared for the trip where you didn't pack it. You have to leave in an hour to the airport. Okay. For the work that you have to do, you have to be at a certain time.
So would you say like the pressure of time can create anxiety?
It does. It can freeze me in my tracks and not allow me to move forward.
And this is important because I'll say, like, I have anxiety. You know, at home, my wife has anxiety in and around time frames and getting things done, but it doesn't freeze us up as much. And this is, I think, a really important piece where if I'm an employer, you know, it's just like I can have the attitude that's, oh, you know, yeah, everybody works under a deadline. Like, you just learn to cope or get through it. The difference is when you have serious anxiety, it can, as Harry said, freeze you in your tracks. It can actually take over your body in such a powerful way that I'm unable to function at a certain level. And this is where it's really important to understand, to kind of be open to understanding that the way in which, you know, an autistic body can be wired, it means that the nervous system can have much more of a control over the entire body. And anxiety and nervous response is really physiological internally. And if it takes over, there's ways that you can help somebody to get out of it, but you can't help an individual get out of it and be like, and we still got to get work done. You have to be able to put work aside for a minute and help them move out of the anxiety, and then you can come back to addressing work. But I just wanted to go a little deeper there, because we all have anxiety in a variety of levels, and probably every person can relate to the pressure of time being stressful, bringing up anxiety. But with an autistic nervous system, it can take over your body, and that's a really important thing.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, Erin.
Yeah, Harry, are there any other, so the pressure of time, are there any other big anxieties?
No, that's the biggest one for me.
Have you want to share like a few others that you've seen? Because you've obviously talked to a lot of neurodiverse people, particularly ones looking for jobs. What are some other triggers of anxiety that you've seen?
Communication is a big one. Now, I'll hold off because we are going to give you some strategies, I guess, in this podcast. But one thing is communication. I've seen a lot of people that have a lot of issues around how do I communicate to an employer, but it's not just my needs, it's every little thing that, you know, you would need to communicate. That you would need to communicate to an employer, and it really depends on the employer and on the employer's policy. I feel like we're really dialed in here, so I'll give you an example. But like sometimes it's a struggle because they don't understand what is the policy. At Meristem, we've just literally built out. I feel like we finally got there. I'm sure you feel the same way. Like we're finally on the right track. With human resources, we have Angelica. She's amazing. Oh, there's a podcast episode. But basically, she's built out this whole system to help us with onboarding and how to understand things better. Oh, we're also doing another amazing thing on the day side of it with onboarding. But one thing is the policy in which we use at Meristem in order to call out if you're sick or to take holiday. How, like, if I want to take holiday, I have to, first of all, know what my time frame is, what my dates are, and then I have to email them to my supervisor and figure out if I have enough vacation. Well, that could actually be a challenging thing for somebody with neurodiversity, because I've discovered is they don't know or understand, well, I have 67 hours of vacation time, and I want to go on holiday in July, and I have no idea how much time I'll have, and you probably have the time off depending on how long you want to take. You might have to do some math, which I found is another struggling thing for people with neurodiversity to figure out how many hours they've worked within a week. Like at the end of the week, we are supposed to, this is a big thing we've seen, Erin. Like we just got the email, I believe it was this morning, check your time cards. Because even though, we think they must be okay because I've clocked in, I've hit the clock in button, or I went on the time card and I put in the time. We all make mistakes. And so we always try to help people with neurodiversity to double check at the end of the pay period their time cards before they get paid, because we have literally seen people not understand why they didn't get paid the proper amount or why the check was lower that month, and they literally have made several big errors on their time card, and they didn't understand because math is challenging for some people with neurodiversity really have like a math issue. They struggle with it, and so figuring that out, I don't know if there's somebody within the company that can help you, your manager could sit down with you, but it really is, it's actually a big barrier in my opinion, because at least at Meristem, like once that paying period ends and closes, Angelica, and she puts in the time, if I make a correction 3 days later, I'm not gonna get paid for the next pay period. She cannot make corrections. She can't go back into the system once she puts it in. So it's a big deal when the employee with neurodiversity can't. That's a big thing.
Yeah. Well, and to me, just the way you're talking, it's like already everything that you just threw out is a lot. And particularly if I'm neurodiverse, what's really important to understand is I might only be able to digest like one or two of those facts. Like, maybe I start out with, hey, this week we're just going to get time card, like enter your time in your time card. What often happens in an onboarding process is I download
everything,
50 million points from an employee handbook, and to what Harry was saying in terms of communication, in autism, you usually have an overactive nervous system, which means you have overactive thinking a lot of the time. So I can actually talk myself out of having a conversation because I've either run through every possible scenario in my head as to why I should or shouldn't have speak up or ask a question or whatever. I've probably even in my mind like I've gone through a whole meeting maybe in my head and never actually gone and done something, and that type of thinking can be driven by anxiety. So it's like anxiety coming into your thoughts that also shuts you down, because I can I then pretend it's like, okay, some fears that pop up are like, what are the consequences if I don't know how to do my time card? You get in trouble, or you get docked, or whatever it is, a write-up, and oftentimes with anxiety, the worry about the consequence can be stronger than the habits that I need to form to say, oh, let me go ask Angelica for help, or let me go back to the handbook where it lays out step by step how I need to do this.
And they've
process.
done that. But there are sometimes, not that I'm trying to go the other direction, Erin, there are employers that if you could dial in your system, and specifically ahead of time, so that nothing goes wrong. In other words, we've seen it ultimately. The employee with neurodiversity starts work. There is a big family trip to family reunion in Los Angeles they didn't know about. They're going to be gone a week.
Yeah.
It's 2 weeks, the holiday, the vacation, after they've started working for you. So if you didn't inform them, or it wasn't properly at the very beginning announced, you shouldn't take any significant time off for 90 days after you started. That's the case with most jobs. You have an emergency, you get sick, but you're not supposed to, like, I'm going to go on holiday in August, but I've worked here for 4 years. I wouldn't take a significant amount of time off within the first 3 months of my job. That's typical. But if the individual doesn't know that, because you don't assume that the person with neurodiversity should know, and each company is different. So I do feel like that, but
no, it's a great point as I think about it, because oftentimes with autistic thinking, it's very black and white in nature, and there's not a lot of nuanced thought. And so let's say if I receive a general email that says time cards aren't updated, please update your time cards. And my time card's perfect. I've done every step okay, but I received this general email. I don't even necessarily think that my time card is completed. That email in itself, without specificity in terms of communication, might set me in anxiety, like, oh, I don't know if my time card's filled out. Why am I receiving this email? I don't know.
Or an anxiety from the all. Like the email was sent to everyone. I feel like I'm okay with this in terms of, I get a lot of emails from Erin, from you, or HR, and I'm just good at or Selena in the front office, thinking, does it apply to me? I mean, it does, but have I done what it says? Do I need to actually concern myself with it? Or can I move along? I've read it, move along with my day. But some people with neurodiversity, it'll stop them in their tracks, even it might not apply to them, or they've already done what was asked.
Yeah, because what can happen is they forget themselves and they just read what's there and they forget what they've done. And what Harry just gave was a beautiful technique of when somebody's in that state, walking them back and saying, well, what have you done? Come back to the reality of what's there, what's been completed, and then you can get to what's not been completed so that you paint an accurate factual picture for somebody rather than a theoretical one, which anxiety coming up into your thinking can create all sorts of illusions in your head that don't apply to reality.
And just to say one more thing on it for the people, some people with neurodiversity, it's like we can't expect the employer to email everyone that's applied, like in the case of time cards. Angelica's not going to go through and see who's approved an email because there's 100 employees here. It's too much. It's so much easier to just email everyone, and then the managers will eventually approve. But each person is individually responsible, and if they've made a mistake, so she's not going to be able to go through and say, Harry's done it. Okay, I won't email Harry, and then she's got to email each person individually, which is actually a higher risk for new employees that just started. She actually get their email wrong, and then they don't get the email. It's so much easier to just all.
Yeah.
And it's easier for the employers. We can't expect, they emailed me, but it did apply to me, and you're angry with them.
And that's what we're talking about, the nuances where black and white thinking, the over anxious mind might feel defensive or whatever the underlying cause is, or the truth might be, oh, I don't know if I actually did this thing and now I'm anxious, but it's going to manifest as frustration, anger, blame at something else or someone else, when the reality is I'm just actually feeling insecure as to whether I got, the process right or not. But while we're on it, we just have a few more minutes. Harry, what are some tips. So we gave out kind of two examples of anxiety that pops up. So one is the pressure of time, deadlines, as one thing, and another one is the need for communication. And I'm going to throw out one more before we go into helpful tips, but that is going to be cognitive understanding. So there's, to me, the communication, which is, understanding nuances of human behavior and, what's expected of me. And then there's, just getting stuff done, like, it's typical that, in autism, the physical system needs a lot more energy to get what a typical body might be able to do. And so the pace is going to be slower until you rebuild the strength of your body through nutrition and integration and all that sort of stuff. But the last one is masking occurs a lot in autism. And I can memorize and regurgitate a lot of information, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I understood the nuance. And if I throw something at somebody with autism, I have to be willing to double check in really practical ways their understanding, because if someone throws something at me that I don't know, my anxiety might lead me to just start talking, and I can sound really intelligent when I'm talking, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I comprehended, processed, and integrated the thought that you're talking about. So I just wanted to articulate those three, but let's jump into some tips. So we have doing, time pressure, we have communication, human relations, we have processing of information.
One thing that we do, I'm going to break it down for somebody with autism. Like, one thing that we do in our job readiness curriculum, one thing that we do is, it's basically, if you look at how to get a job, we actually go in. So one thing, for example, that we've seen people have just extreme anxiety over is applying and determining whether they want to do the job. So I will actually sit down with them. We will go, so this is, you need to use your support network, but anyways, I will actually sit down with them. We will go over the job description. Unfortunately, here's to the employer, some of the job descriptions could be just in general, built better so that they better help a person with neurodiversity, but we literally go through the job description, and then we'll even get into the car and go to the job site and witness somebody doing the job. So like if it's a grocery store, if it's bagging in a grocery store, or maybe it's doing the stocking in a grocery store, we don't even need to involve anybody else or the employer. We simply have read the job description, we've gone over to Rayleigh's, now we're watching somebody, we're just observing, like we're just hanging out, and we're watching somebody do the job, and we're going back and discussing the job itself. But here is the biggest tip that we have just for you, and it's to the employer to allow you to sort of do this. It's called like an informational interview. So after this of viewing the job, Erin, I will literally sit down with the individual, we'll go back to the job description, and we'll write down any questions they have about the job description. An example would be, I have somebody that is extremely afraid of customer service. And even though the job really doesn't, you're probably not going to do a lot with cash register, and also money is a problem for them. And it just says in the job description over and over again, need to be able to do the cash register. I'm assuming if the plague occurs, COVID, and no one shows up to work, you probably, but like I'm thinking to myself, is it rare that you'll ever use the cash register, or how much customer service do you? So getting the individual prepared to actually ask the employer, because I've seen they lose the job, they don't apply for it because they are super nervous. Oh my God, it's customer service and I cannot. So we literally sit down. I've done it, and Eric's done it a few times with people, a bunch of times, where they'll actually sit down on Zoom or in person with the employer and ask a bunch of questions. These can actually be, if you're applying for multiple jobs, the same general questions. You can just tweak them per the job, kind of like a cover, it's basic, like that. And that really can help the individual when they hear from the employer directly, Because it doesn't even matter if I have a relationship with the employer and I've actually gone out to trainings with these employers and actually have spoken to them and know these jobs, like they need to hear it from the employer who's going to pay them.
Yeah.
You will have to do the X amount of customer service. You'll have to do X amount of this, and then they feel so much better. That can relieve, although the process can be daunting for the individual, that can relieve so much anxiety for them that it's unbelievable how much anxiety that sort of a meeting with the employer can relieve.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think on that, one of the other things that you guys do really well is testing somebody's knowledge through doing, in the sense that doing will always show what somebody really knows. And as much as I can say a million things and sound really, like I know everything in a verbal interview, doing then really helps me to see what actually integrated. And it's a simple like, hey, here's something part of the job description X, you need to fill out your time card. Here's a sample time card. Could you fill it out for me? And then I can actually see what did you comprehend from that, and I can ask more clarifying questions from that experience to help understand what that individual's needs are, and supports that they might need to be successful.
And using your support network can really help with that. The people that, if you don't know support network, the people that really support you, whether it's a job coach, a mom, a dad.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on from a communication standpoint is specificity. So, for example, we use the example of an all email that was kind of generally written.
Correct.
If I throw into that general email, like I could write it generally and say, please complete your time cards by X date.
Yeah.
With autism, I don't necessarily know if that applies to me or not. If I write, please complete your time card by X date if you haven't already done so, and the already done so just adds a level of detail that I can go back and say, oh, have I completed my time card yet? And that can ease a lot of pain, because it gives me the tools to be able to problem solve my own situation. It's got enough detail. Other examples of that are if I'm giving specific feedback on a job. With the autistic mind, if I give general feedback like, hey, really great mowing today, okay, that means absolutely nothing. But if I say, you walk some very straight lines pushing that mower, I love how the lawn has diagonal and vertical lines in it that make little squares, kind of like a baseball field. That to me is something that brings home the exact experience that I can have when I look at something.
But what about the individual? We could literally take a survey of all of our neurotypical staff at Meristem and see that they probably struggle with this at a level as well. But if you're having the review, like we do an annual review at Meristem, so they're providing feedback. Eric is providing me a bunch of feedback on my job. How do you get the person with neurodiversity to, because he can only do so much, so he's brought up the topic, the this and the that. At the end, he says, do you have any questions? Mm-hmm. Well, the person with neurodiversity is unprepared and came with 0 questions. Yeah. How do we get them, or what are some strategies so that they are prepared and that they have, and sometimes Eric likes to send ahead the review. We're going to go over it in person, but he sends ahead the review if we'd like to read it ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that's a place where you could spend the company money, an hour or 2 if you need to, and take notes on the document that he sent, so you're prepared with some questions that he'll ask you. But how do you? Yeah. You're so freaked out. How do you actually?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a really good point. Is time, right? So if I'm stressed about time, which was one of the first anxiety pieces that you shared, Harry. To me, breaking it down into simple, digestible forms. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, if I say, hey, here's 3 questions to think about for the interview.
Right.
3 questions is digestible, 3 questions can get the juices going. If I say, here's 50 questions to digest, that's a lot. That might be so anxiety inducing that and overwhelming that I just don't process any of those questions because it was too much. And so I think understanding that resiliency is low and has to be built up over time, and what amount you give at a given point is really important. And you can gauge how much is, you go a little bit over, and you can see through somebody's body language or through their ability to take and apply that information, how much they understood and didn't understand. So to me, I mean, I'm just throwing this out there, this is not necessarily what we do, but I'm almost thinking like being able to do more of a 30-day trial or something with somebody with autism, where you gradually integrate them into the pieces, rather than it's like what typically is, okay, I do my interview, and then there's a like 1 week maybe of onboarding where you just get downloaded with a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, we're kind of slowing it down now at Meristem.
Yeah.
We're actually doing a 5-week course with the day program to actually go over all of the documents that would be needed to complete your job correctly. It's a 5-week course, even I'm taking the course, and a bunch of people that have been here for several years or more. But that can help. It's an hour a week, so it's really not requiring a whole lot of time from the employer.
Yeah. So to me, just extending the process is a good tip.
Yeah.
Typically, we want to accelerate everything, and if you're willing to be patient, like, hey, we're going to do 1 HR onboarding task this week, and then we're going to do maybe a couple work tasks this week, and then week 2 we'll do maybe 1 or 2 HR onboarding things, and keep moving, so you're putting it in a digestible form.
But I do want to, just before we end, because I want to just say something about this idea of a two-way street, Erin, because I think it's so important that we have a podcast about anxiety. We talk about all of these strategies, but we also understand, as a person with neurodiversity, things happen. I've got just kind of a funny example. It's not really funny, but things just happen. In terms of like, what am I going to do today,
Yeah.
An example would be, we just had this beautiful rafting trip yesterday down to the American River here in Sacramento, and we were told to show up and be prepared for it a week ago, but then we got an email that said, have you responded? Yes, I'm going to attend. And I guess there was a little bit of a miscommunication, as in terms of, do we actually have to email? Because we were told to just prepare to come, and now you don't know what you're doing. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, but there was a miscommunication. It wasn't anything to do with anything. It's not really a big deal. There were just a few people that maybe didn't understand or weren't on the same thing about, have your team, respond to this Google document and put yes or no and discuss with them if they're gonna. And for me, that's what happened. But somebody with neurodiversity is like, why didn't you tell me to reply yes?
Yeah.
And so, but you have to understand that because so many times it's no one's fault. That there's just so many different moving pieces. Like at Meristem, there's a lot. There's Erin, there's Shay, there's 4 different managers for different departments, and a lot can happen in a job where no one's at fault.
Yeah.
But when people with neurodiversity get, sometimes it can happen. It doesn't happen all the time. Like they feel like they didn't do it. Or why didn't you tell me to do this? And they get upset. They have to understand it is a two-way street.
Yeah. 100%.
They have to understand that things happen.
Well, and to your point, Harry, it's really important that I have to be able to acknowledge to myself that I have anxiety.
Right.
And when I can acknowledge I have anxiety, then I can develop tools that I can help myself overcome that anxiety. Like, you don't necessarily always want to say it's 100% on the employer to just adjust and deal with the anxiety that I have. I need to take responsibility for that. And like, so for example, when I was coaching athletes for orienteering, we always talked about having like a mental anchor. So if you got confused or lost while you were running through the terrain, we would say 2 feet on the ground, where you just dead stopped until you figured out where you were.
Yeah.
You didn't keep running around like a chicken with its head cut off, for example. You always had that mental mental anchor that brought you back. So that's a way to, if you have anxiety, to create one or two mental anchors. Like, for example, one step at a time. What can happen is I look at a process and it's like, wow, that's 50 steps. I can't deal with any of them. But if I say one step at a time, all I need to try to do is focus on one step and accomplish that one step and not worry about 50 other steps, and then do the next step after that.
And we don't want you to worry, like if you have like a memory board with all your things on it, but they do say if you write down all your to-dos, they're not in your head, they're on a piece of paper. But I do just have one final question for Erin before we end here, because Erin, how many people would you say that you manage, you're like, that are under you're the supervisor of?
Probably like 10 or 12.
And how busy are you?
Very busy.
So, like, for example, I've just seen Selena over there, like if somebody requests time off, you're the supervisor for 10 people, they have to get approved.
Yeah.
They emailed you, I need to take time off on the phone. Like, is it okay for this is the two-way street. I've seen it with my supervisor, with Eric, like they can't just expect Erin Sherm is going to get back to me, and they get so furious with Erin, he never got back to them, but they never follow up with Erin because they're just like, he didn't tell me, he didn't communicate with me. Well, he's doing a million things, he's the busiest person. The fact that you didn't either find him in person, or maybe you could text him or email him again.
Yeah.
The fact that you didn't do that because you were just expecting, why didn't he get back to you? That is something to consider.
Yeah. Maybe that's what we close with,
Yeah.
and this will be for those job seekers out there, or anybody who struggles with anxiety or autism, or just not whatever, that, and for anyone probably in general, this is good advice, but it is really important to be able to give grace to human beings.
Yeah.
Now, people might try to take advantage of you, and you don't need to give grace to that. But understanding, like being willing to be, like we talked about curiosity, and the curiosity to be like, maybe I want to understand a little bit more before I make a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes what happens is I just make a conclusion and then it's a done deal, and I never took the time to understand what was going on with another human being.
Erin doesn't care about his employees. No, that's not true. He's just running the company.
Yeah. And so like my I think the final thing that we can close today with is, remember that we're all humans going through this process. And when I can stop and ask, or I can stop and wonder a little bit about, why didn't Erin get back to me in a timely manner? Or, why is the email communication about the river rafting trip incongruent with, the other email? Like, and just ask a clarifying question before I just go, make a conclusion or start walking down a road that I don't necessarily need to without understanding it first. It will create better relationships. It will create better understanding, and you'll be able to find out more effectively if somebody is trying to take advantage of you, because you've actually done the research, put the tests out, and proven to yourself that you don't have to hang on to something that you might have missed because the way that person or the way that interaction happened had a pattern that said, you know what, that's unhealthy.
Right, exactly. That's a perfect place to end. We'll come back with more great content. If you have any specific questions around anxiety or things that you'd like us to discuss, please put in the, if you're watching on YouTube, you can put in the comments section. Maybe we'll make a podcast with further ideas on that. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube. We forget to say that a lot. And join follow the podcast on the podcasting app that you're watching. You have to go into the leave it in the right hand corner and press the plus sign.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks everybody. Meristem podcast out.